Welcome to the Metaphysical Journey. I'm Michael, and I'm happy that you all are with me tonight. I am very excited to present this interview. This interview is with a person that's a friend of mine. I first met Steven on December the 10th, 2022. I went back and checked my notes on the date when he gave me a runes reading at a metaphysical fair, and I was really drawn to him. And I later ended up working with him for a few months on runes and learned so much. And I learned during that process that in talking to him, further conversations, he's about a whole lot more than just runes. He's got a broad, vast pool of knowledge that he pulls from, and I've learned so much. So I'm very happy to have this opportunity to interview him this evening. Steven, thank you for this. I know you're a very busy person, but welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me on, Mike. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's my pleasure and my honor. I always like to start by introducing the person, but I'm going to ask you, if you had to introduce yourself and describe yourself to someone, how would you do that? What would you say?
Okay, so if we're talking about like our spirituality and everything, because everybody says that they hate labels, but that's how we understand each other and ourselves. And the label I use to identify myself is I call myself a Germanic heathen. I embrace a lot of ethnic folkways from various Germanic tribes, including the Anglo-Saxon tribes, including Scandinavian tribes. You know, throughout Northern Europe, various traditions incorporate my spiritual practices. So I wouldn't say I'm an Anglo-Saxon heathen. I wouldn't say I'm a Norse heathen. I'm a Germanic heathen. And that is probably what I consider the most appropriate label for who I am and what I do as far as spirituality.
Okay, beautiful. So in our last conversation that we had, we got into a really great topic, and it was on shadow work. And this is something that prior to coming into the metaphysical environment, I had never heard of. It wasn't taught and talked about in church. In fact, we were encouraged to stay as far away from that as anything shadowy as possible. So when I came in, I started hearing people talking about they're in shadow work and all the different things we're doing. And I thought, what is that? Anyway, in our conversation, you really went into a lot of depth. And I would like to, from those notes, I have some questions that I would like to ask you about some of that. But when it comes to shadow work, I feel that sometimes there are only so many layers on the onion, and you can peel back and peel back and peel back. And after a while, I start to, for myself, start to wonder, is this even authentic anymore? Is this real? I mean, am I really getting to the heart of it? And I sometimes feel like there's some deception. So a question that I have for you is that when we do shadow work, what are we possibly lying to ourselves about during that process?
Well, like a couple of the examples you used are really great metaphors, for the deception that people engage in. Is like, these so many layers and so many facets. I've got a saying I like to employ, people like to muddy the waters so you don't see how shallow they really are. If you talk about, oh, I've got so many layers, so much depth, there's so many facets, that's a way for them to convince themselves that they're doing a lot of work, when really what it is they're stroking their own egos, and they're actively avoiding work because they're trying to compartmentalize what it is that they're really avoiding dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
Because so much of shadow work, honestly, is coming to terms with what we consider our personality really being a series of trauma responses.
Yes.
And until you come to terms with that, until you come to terms with everything that you thought that you were using to discover or invent yourself was really a trauma response to avoid working on yourself, you're not ever going to make any active steps forward. You're going to allow people to deceive you through confirmation bias by telling you what resonates with you, what's palatable to you based on these established trauma responses.
Well, very well, I know everything today is about trauma, definitely, and there's a lot built into that. But are there areas possibly where we might be, I don't know, susceptible to deception or something?
Absolutely. So in so many aspects, and that's the whole thing is we've got to look at what is it that what needs do we have that we're not getting met? And how are we lying to ourselves about that? If we keep putting ourselves in these circumstances to get our needs met in unhealthy ways, and we don't ever stop and identify what is this need really? You find yourself around these toxic people who people who say, oh, I'm an empath and I draw these narcissistic parasitic people to me. No, you're going and you're seeking these people out because it fulfills a need within you. Because then when you get taken advantage of, you can say, oh, woe is me, I'm just such a giving person, instead of stopping and taking stock of who you're seeking out. Because you can be a giving person without gravitating towards parasitic individuals.
Yes.
But so many people who want to call themselves empaths and caring, loving people, they'll sit there and they'll give you a laundry list of examples of times that they were taken advantage of, times that they were too generous or generous to the wrong person or this or that or the other. And when they're saying things like that, it makes you, if you are being honest, it makes you question their level of discernment, their ability to make healthy choices.
Hmm.
And if they can't make healthy choices, then how can they identify their own strengths and weaknesses?
Yes.
Like for me, I one thing I want to interject, and maybe I should have started with this, like for me and because I can only speak from my personal experience.
Hmm.
And like for me, the first step in doing shadow work is I had to look in the mirror and say, you know what? You're a stupid motherfucker, but
Hmm.
I don't want you to be.
Hmm.
I had to be brutally honest that everything I was doing, with or without the best of intentions, was dead ass wrong, or it was for the wrong reasons. Even when I was doing quote unquote the right thing, it was for an unhealthy reason. And I needed to establish the parameters of my decision making process from start to finish before I could even imagine calling myself a healthy, balanced individual.
Yes. So in the process of this, I mean, with the time that you spent in front of the mirror and what you said, it's really about questioning our motives. I mean, how often do we question our motives or those of other people when they're involved in this type of work?
Exactly, and that's the whole thing is like, and a lot of people, they'll be suspicious of other people,
Mm.
but that's not questioning motives, because why they're not stopping and saying, why is it that I'm so suspicious of other people? you
Yes.
know because not there are a lot of people who are out to mislead you. There are a lot of people out there to get you, but not everybody's out to do you harm, because honestly most people don't care about you. Most are so wrapped up in their own nonsense that you don't even register as a background character in their lives until you come into conflict with their own deceptions that they're trying to avoid working through.
Right.
And so you've got to ask yourself, why is it that I need to perceive these people as being out to get me, or as being needing or deserving of my help? How is that feeding my ego? How is that satisfying a need that I have?
Yes.
Because that's the whole thing is like, you've got what I call suicidal altruism, where you are just so desperate to prove that you are a good person, that you are morally praiseworthy, that you will do things that put yourself in harm's way, whether it's financial harm, whether it's physical harm. You associate with people who have just an whether it's deserved or not, have an overwhelming animosity for you, that stereotype you for whatever reason. Why would you put yourself in proximity with those individuals? Why would you seek conflict with them? What are you trying to validate in your own experience by seeking conflict, by proving to whomever that you're right or that you're justified, that your anger, that your hate is better than their anger and their hate? What
Yes.
does that serve within you? Because until you identify that, you're going to be sitting there transposing your own motives on other people. You're going to be, because it's the thing, a liar is always worried about who is or isn't being honest with them. A thief is always worried about locking their shit up because they're always worried about somebody taking from them. A hurtful person is always nervous about the environment that they're in because they fear somebody catching them when their guard's down, because that's exactly what they're going to do given the opportunity. Everybody tells on themselves. You just have to have a measurable level of discernment to recognize it and then accept it, because
Yes.
that's a big part of shadow work, is accepting people being honest with you, people telling you more often than not exactly what their motives are, exactly what they do and don't value. They can't wait to feed their ego and tell you all about themselves. All you have to do is allow them. I've got a saying that I grew up with as a kid. You've got two eyes, two ears, two nostrils, and one mouth for a reason. So you can look, listen, and breathe twice as much as you speak. That's how you learn, not by talking, but by observing, by taking in and processing what everyone is showing you. How do you learn how the animals move in the forest? By being silent, by being still.
Hmm. I know that recently I've been dealing, as part of my own shadow work or whatever, with making assumptions and automatically filling in the backstory behind things that I see, even though I don't have all the facts. And I can certainly absolutely see when you're talking about feeding the ego or disguising it as, altruism. I see how that plays in. So I'm glad that you went into that. But as well, with so much of this, I know with shadow work, it's often really encouraged for people to kind of go into that when they're looking for things to help boost their self-esteem or confidence. So you hit on that in that process of trying to learn that, it really puts us at risk of falling prey to other people and the deception and manipulation that's out there, thinking that we're doing everything right, but we're not necessarily. So how do we hold ourselves accountable for actions that we take in ignorance? We mean the right thing, but we're actually not helping our own selves.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. It's about holding yourself accountable by saying, it doesn't matter if I did something with the best of intentions. That doesn't alleviate the harm you did or are still doing. It's holding yourself accountable and saying, you know what, like I'd said at the beginning, when I started doing shadow work for myself, I looked in the mirror and I said, you're a stupid motherfucker, but
Mhm.
I don't want you to be. I held myself accountable for every dumb, hurtful, ignorant thing that I said or did along the way, and said, from this point forward, I'm not going to allow myself to act like an ignorant, hurtful person.
Mhm.
I cannot. If I want people to see me as a better person, I have to be a better person. I can't have some tear jerking, pearl clutching moment where I have a pity party about how people did me wrong and didn't appreciate me and didn't value me and didn't deserve me and da 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 da, and oh, and now I'm better. I
Right.
call that's spiritual masturbation. And it's just embarrassing. And you see that a lot in shadow work, where it's these people just feeding their egos and just playing like they're working on things, but what it is they're holding up badges of brokenness, trying to gain social currency from it by
Yes.
seeing who can rack up the most victimhood badges. And that's where you get if you've ever thought about this term that's used in society, Mike, intersectionality. We talk about intersectionality in this, that, or the other. And what that really, the nefarious purpose of that, again, is it's to compound victimhood badges. Whoever has the most intersectional victimhood badges has the highest social currency. And that's why you get these accusations of ableism, of classism, of thisism, of thatism, because it's, oh, woe is me. Look, I've got my victimhood badge in this circumstance. You must pity me. You must feel sorry for me. and they empower themselves through that weakness.
Mhm.
It's like it's said in the book of Revelations in the Bible, the meek shall inherit the earth. That
Yeah.
was a warning. That was a warning. You
Okay.
know, think about that. The meek, the sensitive, the mewling, the ones that can't handle the pressure. And every one of us is under pressure.
Yes.
Every one of us is called to task to do better and be better. And if we're meek, if words hurt, if we can't handle the pressure, if somebody has to hold us by the hand from the cradle to the grave because we're afraid to face our own shadows, that's meekness. And that's sure not effective in living a wholesome, functional, healthy life for yourself or for others.
You're right. It has become, it's an identity. It is a lot of energy that's pulled in from that. I'll be honest, I was ignorant of what intersectionality is. I've seen the word, but I didn't know what it was. And you just explained that. I didn't know exactly what that was. So thank you for going into that. Because that is
Now the people. I'm
big.
sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but now the people who use that as a weapon, as a tool, they're going to give you a very, very different definition of intersectionality. But that goes back to Orwellianism. How they will mislabel words and terms and use the ignorance of the people that they're interacting with, and these, like I said, intersectionalities of victimhood. They'll accuse you of this, that, and the other until you acquiesce and feel pity for them and don't hold them accountable for their behaviors. Because at the end of the day, that's what they're saying is like, don't hold me accountable. Like, don't you see I'm this, I'm that, I'm that. You're just being a bigot, but
Yes.
I'm not being a liar. You'll call me a bigot, you'll call me ignorant, you'll call me a hillbilly, a redneck, all kinds of things, but you won't call me a liar.
Right. So you bring up a really huge point with that one. When you were talking about intersectionality, you referenced a Bible thing. I was thinking of the Sadducees and the Pharisees. I'm so fortunate I'm not like them. And then as well, there's kind of a pass that's given to people if it's like in the spiritual domain, like, well, they're spiritual, so why would they? And yet, many people don't have any qualms questioning the history of religion and what it's done to people over the years, and that it hasn't always been on the level. So it's fascinating with that. I
Well, and
know,
here's the thing. Actually, it's very on the level.
I guess it is,
People
but we don't want to accept it that
because
way.
because people aren't employing a measurable level of discernment. Now,
Right.
we've talked before about Kabbalism, and
Yeah.
a lot of people, perhaps in your audience, aren't aware of what Kabbalism is. And so I'm going to give a short definition for those who
Please.
might not be sure. Kabbalism is the indigenous, mystical, spiritual, whatever you want to call magic. It's the magic of Middle Eastern peoples, of Semitic individuals. And these are the group of people that wrote the Bible, that wrote the Abrahamic texts, that Judaism, Christianity, all the various sects, whether you want to argue Catholicism is different from Protestantism, this, that, and the other, but all the different tenets of Christianity and Islam, all three of these major faiths are all Abrahamic faiths. They all trace their root back to an individual named Abraham from the Middle East.
Mhm.
And their guiding principle, how like I say that I'm a Germanic heathen, and the things that I do for divination and other metaphysical and esoteric practices come from my indigenous folkways. Now, the people from the Middle East, their name for all of that is Kabbalism. And in Kabbalism, there's a principle called the method of revelation, wherein they tell you what they're doing, and that alleviates them from the burden of guilt. Ignorance is no excuse. It's not my fault you weren't able to figure it out. You should have read the fine print. All of that works into the method of revelation. And that's why the last book in the Bible, one of the principal Abrahamic texts, is called the Book of Revelations,
Mhm.
because through Kabbalism, they are telling you what they're working on doing.
Yeah, the book of Revelation is very challenging because, it is the last one in the Bible, as you've said, but it's also the one that's hidden in the most symbology. It's difficult to explain and understand, and everyone has a different interpretation on it. So that is a challenge. There's a lot hidden in there for sure.
And now the reason that I brought up the book of Revelations and the method of revelation, and the whole thing about the prevalence of Kabbalism in society is we assign motives based on our desires. And, like a great example of this, remember when we were having our classes and we were talking about the Algies room, and it being placed in Merck's state, and Algies being a rune of defense and protection. And when you invert it and turn it into the peace sign, it becomes an esoteric symbol of docility and submissiveness. And the
Mhm.
people that put this upon themselves, they they take those characteristics upon themselves. And you had said, well, aren't couldn't some of the people who use these symbols in their corporate logos and things like that, couldn't they be doing that, you know, to be helpful, to benefit people? And I just looked at you like, come on, man. And seeing that's an example of you trying to assign motives to these individuals, and you're overlooking their consistent pathological behaviors. They consistently operate against the greater good of the common man. And so there is no reason to assume that anything that they do, especially hidden things that they do,
Yeah.
is for the benefit or the greater good of anyone. If they're doing something, it benefits them. And a lot of times that stuff, it does have a negative consequence, a, a undesirable potentiality that manifests from this. And that in the end is secondary
Mhm.
to them fulfilling their agenda. And we turn around and we transpose importance to that secondary irrelevance because that is what affects us the most. And so we assign greater meaning to that than we do to what we're overlooking because we can't step outside of our ego and say, is this an incidental thing? What's really going on? What led to this happening? Instead of saying, woe is me, why did this happen to me? We keep the focus on ourselves so that we can feel sorry for ourselves.
Mhm.
And when we step outside of ourselves, then we can see the actions of others for what they truly are.
Yeah.
Often it's negligence.
Yes. Well, I know I will say this, that when working with you, you gave me that look quite a few times on things. And I remember I'm thinking like, man, those Germanic heathens, they need the sensitivity, love and light chip upgrade or something. But I really respected that in your style because you didn't cut the crap at all. You just told it like it was. And I think in today's world, we need a lot more of that. Definitely. Especially when it comes around, the shadow work and the things we've been talking about, of just being very realistic and seeing things for what they are, because it's a totally different realm that we go into when we do that. So in keeping in track with what we're talking about and where we're going with this, um, you've talked about feeding the ego, and that plays a big role. And I want to talk a little bit about the selfishness of it all, because you've referenced that several times, and accepting the selfishness. Is that good? Is it bad? I'm not sure
Well,
sometimes.
and here's the thing, and that trying to decide if it's good or bad,
Yeah.
if it's praiseworthy or not, that gets you stuck on a loop that you'll never find your way out of because you're trying to justify behaviors instead of acknowledge and accept behaviors.
Yes.
You're trying to give yourself a reason, a way out for why did I do what I did instead of saying, you know what, I did this and I was angry at the time. It doesn't matter if my anger was justified or not. I was angry and I need to own that. And I need to come to terms with that. I need to recognize the root cause of that because it's very rarely that situation. You know, like I'll use myself as an example because really that's a lot of all of this comes from me taking honest inventory of myself. And, you know, when I was younger, you know, I was a very, very aggressive person. I was a violent individual. And I was violent and I was aggressive because when I was younger, when I was a little kid, people were really, really rough with me and stuff. And I grew up really afraid. And when I was no longer a small boy that people could make afraid, I knew what it meant to be afraid. And I knew the triggers and I knew the catalysts. I knew how to invoke fear in other people. I knew how to scare people with a look, with a word. I didn't even have to say anything. I could just adjust my stance and shift my presence and invoke fear in people. And I did that a lot. And it was empowering to me because now, as long as I was making everyone around me afraid, they couldn't make me afraid.
Right.
But it took me being honest with myself. Why am I doing that? Why? Because I'm afraid of being afraid. And I had to come to terms with the root source of my aggression, of my belligerence, that it was because I was still trying to protect a small, scared little boy.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to get to a point where I said, you know what? You are not that small, scared little boy. And nothing you do now can change what happened then.
Mm-hmm.
And until you stop trying to change what happened then, you can't make now better. You're
Right.
just making now like then. You're becoming the thing that made you afraid then. And is that what you want to be? Do you want to be the thing that made you afraid, that made you uncomfortable, that made you feel alone?
Yes.
Don't do that to yourself. Don't do that to others. Don't do that to the people around you.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I had to come to terms with. And then I realized that I didn't have a reason to be afraid, that I didn't have to put myself around people that I needed to guard myself like that with. I could choose a different path. I could choose different associations. I could choose different reactions. I was not bound by the trauma of my childhood. I didn't have to use that as a crutch for my behaviors.
Yes. You know, this may sound like a really simplistic question, but how does a person know when they need to do shadow work? And I ask that because it's very often prescribed, like, oh, you need to do shadow work, or you need to, and I think that when people say that, what their meaning is that there's something inside yourself you need to work on in order to open yourself up to receive, because a lot of it's based around the law of attraction, manifestation, and it's linked to that directly. And so it's easy to spend forever in shadow work, just looking, digging for whatever it is, because we want to have a better life. We want things different. And you hear all the time, the answer is within you. And so we're always looking for that answer. And we talked earlier in this interview, it's a trap, and you do get trapped on that wheel in there. So what are some signs to look for that a person could say, okay, no, I know that this particular thing, I need to do shadow work. For the rest of it, I just need to accept and grow up, so to speak.
Well, a lot of it, and like you said, the answers are within you.
Right.
The thing is when you're allowing third parties, some other individual to tell you how to seek and what to seek for, you know, and like this whole obsession with generational trauma and this default state of brokenness that everyone needs to heal from to move forward,
Mm-hmm.
that perspective keeps you trapped.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to rescind that. You have to rebuke the concept of brokenness. You have to say, I don't need some diagnosis. I don't need some categorization. I don't need some syndrome to describe who I am. I'm not atypical. Everyone's atypical. That's ridiculous. But if they turn around and they've got the majority of people calling themselves atypical, that sounds typical. But they've got everybody spun on their heads and refusing to even think for half a second, just clasping to these badges of brokenness because there's social currency in that, and
Yeah.
saying, oh, look, I'm broken this way, I'm broken this way, I'm broken this way. And all these intersectionalities of victimhood badges, they call that shadow work, and it's nonsense. And it feeds the ego, and it's unhealthy in the expression of selfishness. Because you brought that up earlier about selfishness, and what is selfishness, and is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? And we kind of drifted away from that, but I think we should go back to that a little bit and look at it. Really, you know, a lot of what we do trying to prove that we aren't selfish is really, really very petty and really, really shallow. It's a lot of surface. It's a lot of grand gestures and a lot of look at me's, and like, oh, I did this, and this proves that I'm a good person. This proves that I've done the work. This proves I put in the hours. This proves whatever. And as long as you're out trying to prove something, the only thing you're proving is that you don't have it.
True.
Winners don't go out trying to win championships. Winners feel like winners, and they just live their lives, and other people seek to defeat them, seek to take that crown. And it's all about being honest about where you're at. So it's okay to be hungry. It's okay to have drive. It's okay to have desire, but be honest about your motives. Don't
Yeah.
transpose different motives to your behaviors, trying to make yourself look better and sound better and be viewed in a different light by the people around you, because you're not comfortable in who you are and what you're doing. So you need to get this committee to support, to live your life by proxy,
Right.
to turn around and smile and nod and like, oh, no, you can't say that. You can't be around them. You can't do that. You can't. Oh, like, and you're spending your life walking around on eggshells, trying to prove what a wonderful person you are and how kind you are and how you never hurt anybody's feelings and you never say anything wrong and you never do this and you never do that. And all you're doing is you're just living in a shell, looking at all the things you never do.
Yeah.
And why not? Why not? Because you're scared. Why are you scared? What are you scared of? What are you afraid of? What do you think you're going to lose?
Yes.
What is it that you don't even have that you're desperately trying to get? Because that's often the thing. Everything that you're trying not to lose is something that you don't have, and that's the source of that desperation.
This kind of leads into when we were discussing this before, Yass-Lighting,
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of built into that. And I've heard of gaslighting, but I had never heard of Yass-Lighting. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, and it's a term that come about, in mockery of people overusing gaslighting and turning around and flip-flopping that into this society, this culture of false positivity, of enabling destructive behaviors, telling somebody, oh, you go, girl. Yeah, you don't need him. Do that, go wild, do YOLO. And all they're doing is they're gassing people up to engage in really, really self-destructive behaviors so they can kick back and watch and laugh and have like a reality TV show in their own lives, unedited, unscripted, raw, right here. And it's hateful and it's hurtful and it's petty. And anytime you see somebody cheering you on, yes, 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 like, woo, like I said, they're feeding your ego. They're trying to get you so blinded with their support that you don't even see the consequences of your actions.
Yes.
Why are they so fervent about you going out and doing it? You show him. Why do you want me to show him? What do you get from that?
Yeah.
Oh shit. Okay, yeah. Now I see a little bit more clearly. You've been beefing with this cat for a quick minute, and the second I show a little bit of friction with them, now all of a sudden you're going to feed into that, and you're going to act like the most supportive person in the world. so that I don't look and question your motives. Remember, we were talking about that earlier, about questioning your own motives, questioning the motives of others. All these people in your life that are so supportive of you, so supportive of you.
Mm-hmm.
How long have they been in your life? How far have you gone with their support? Are they really supporting you, or are they engaging in lateral oppression? Are
Mm-hmm.
they like crabs in a bucket holding you in place, keeping you from moving forward? Because misery loves company.
Yeah,
And
that's
they're going to smile and they're going to say, oh, it's not your fault. They just don't understand you. They don't appreciate you. They don't deserve you. You're the best. You're the greatest. You're Yass-Lighting. It's all a bunch of lies that's feeding your ego to keep you trapped and pitiful and pathetic so they can snicker. And I promise you, all these shiny, happy people, every one of them talk ugly as fuck about somebody,
true.
and they don't want to admit it. You know, I know some of these folks that they turn around and they wave all kinds of flags, and they talk about tolerance, and they talk about equality, and they talk about love, and yet they'll talk about hillbillies and dicks. They'll
Yeah.
talk about people that they think are beneath them, that they think are ignorant and backwards. Why? Because they don't share the values that you have.
Mm-hmm.
But yet you're so open-minded and willing to accept people for who they are. And yet you want to mock people who want to just do their own thing away from everybody. And yet you're going to turn around and say, oh, but they want to inflict their values upon me. Kind of like you demanding to bring a pride parade to every small town all across the world.
Yes.
Check yourself. Check your behaviors. Own yourselves. Be accountable for your actions. Everybody, everything you're worried about the next man doing is some shit you're doing or you're wanting to do and you're too afraid to do.
True.
That goes for everybody, especially these people who promote this false positivity. Because what they're trying to do is they're trying to inflict conformity of thought and action. They want to strip you of your individuality. They want to make it to where there's nothing to that you can't that you don't tolerate, because there's nothing that anybody stands for.
True.
Everybody acquiesces. The meek shall inherit the earth.
Y-
So it is written, so it shall be done.
Yeah. When you had mentioned this before, what I immediately thought of how, going back to Yass-Lighting, how that's used, how I see it, to me, it's example of it. It's after someone has been really working on self-improvement and trying to get something, and someone says, yeah, open your throat chakra, stand up, speak your truth, you do this, you do that. And sometimes it's disastrous results. The flip side of that is that you have people that really do put a lot of effort, time, and energy. I'm gonna say they put a lot of energy into learning more and new perspectives. And by energy, I mean their time and their money. And
Mhm.
yet they receive criticism from the ones that basically post memes. That's about it. And there's a
Mhm.
thing I saw on Facebook once that says, um, what was it? Doing meth and posting religious memes does not make you a Methodist. And there's a lot to that. So it's like there's this degree of a badge is the meme, and we all put those out there because they're funny, they serve purposes, but sometimes that's about the extent of what there is. And then you have other people that are really trying to do something, and they get a lot of backlash or weird energy coming their way. So there's jealousy and envy. There's all kinds of stuff going on. And it's confusing because it's supposed to be taking place in a spiritual atmosphere, you know, and it's really not that way. So this is a weird, it's a really timely topic, and not a lot of people talk about that. The other thing that you brought up in our conversation, which caught my interest, was, and you referenced a little bit already, but spiritual masturbation. Now that was, I had never heard that before, that type of
Yeah.
masturbation. But could you talk in more depth about that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's like you see this a lot on like these TikTok spiritual channels and stuff. Like, and I can't even name a single one of them because I honestly don't want to feed any of them my energy or give them any advertisement. But like there's this chick who her dad is like an executive with Boeing or like Lockheed Martin or something. And she goes to all these festivals and she's like, "Oh yes, and the love and the light," and you know, and it's like, you like you don't know a single thing about hardship in life. For you, a hardship consists of like not getting the trip to Lollapalooza, or I don't know if Lollapalooza is still a thing or not. But like these people who like I said, they go out of their way to present themselves as like so enlightened and having done all this work, and they're so deep, and like I said, and they talk all this nonsense and this circular, you know non sequiturs, to where it's like I was saying earlier, they muddy the water so you don't see how shallow they are.
Right.
And that's what spiritual masturbation is where like you go, and because you're looking to validate something within yourself, there are individuals out there who are really really good at their messaging and picking up on verbal and nonverbal cues about what it is that you're lacking in your experience, and they will turn around and custom tailor a generic program. It's like, did you ever play Mad Libs as a kid?
No.
Okay, there's a funnest thing in the world, which I'm a word guy and stuff. So like Mad Libs, it was like this book. It would have like a story in it, and they would have like words taken out, and like on the first it would be like, okay, a noun, and so like you would name a noun or an adjective, a color, a location, and then whatever random answers you gave, that was plugged into the story. And so like you made your own story kind of thing. And like I said, I used to get them at the Scholastic book clubs as a kid. Look them up; they still exist. But so that's what you get with a lot of these spiritual masturbationists and everything. And like essentially they run like metaphysical milking tables. Yeah, Google that term, guys. But anyways, so go sticking with the spiritual masturbation term, and they sit there and they figure out exactly what it is that they let you fill in the blanks on that Mad Lib. And that's how they custom tailor these programs to get you to heal your inner child, or to identify your spirit animal, or to figure out who your ascended master is, figure out what kind of dragon is the one that you all have our dragon helpers and our angel helpers and this and that. It's a bunch of spiritual masturbation because it feeds your ego, because it says you're special, you're important, you've got these entities that want to come and help and guide you and protect you. Why? Oh, don't worry about that because you're special. And it's, like I said, and it's just so shallow. It's so fake. It's so childish, but that's what it's geared towards, is people who have these trauma responses and triggering and manipulating these trauma responses. And as long as you take stock of yourself and you're honest with yourself, very little of what any of these people can tell you or do with you or for you is necessary.
Right. So speaking of the support or the help that we have on the other side that is actually there, um, how do our guides choose us? How does that happen? What takes place there?
Okay, well, so for what most people consider spirit guides is figments of their imagination. It's stuff that has been fed their egos. A lot of people, when they go to these gurus, what happens is they go through a hypnotic process, and they have some implanted suggestions. And based on confirmation biases, they fill in the blanks. And then whoever you want your ascended master to be, you just call out to them and they'll come to you. And that's why you've got these people who think that they're a priestess of Athena and a devotee of Freya, and the Morrigan is my patroness, and it's like they've got all these entities from these conflicting pantheons, and they think, wow, you're so special. What is it about you that's got all these entities that in the established lore, they are at war. One of the principal things in Germanic heathenry is we talk about the Aesir Vanir War and the consequences that existed for eons, over the conflict between these two warring groups of entities, what most people would call gods.
Mhm.
But like I said, people want to convince themselves that they're so special, that they've got all these entities from the far reaches of the galaxy crossing time and space, seeking them out. When, if you look at it, yes, we have entities that help us, but it's entities that have a vested interest in helping us. And who is that? Our ancestors, the people that we're directly tied to. Within Germanic heathenry, we have over 27 distinct afterlife destinations. I'm actually going to be giving a lecture on this at my venue on March the 2nd in Independence, Missouri. But, one of the afterlife destinations is the Disir. It's a group of female ancestor spirits that stay earthbound, that are invested in the success and continuation of their lineage. And so they stay here. They don't go to another afterlife destination. They don't choose to be reincarnated in a new physical form. They choose to remain non-physical and earthbound to guide and nurture and protect their direct descendants. Why? Because they have a vested interest in them. And that's the entities that you're receiving help from, is your ancestors, the people that are tied to you, the entities that have ascended, that come from the same plane of existence as you come from, not entities that you and your ancestors have historically and consistently been at odds with. That's another thing, an aspect of spiritual masturbation, how people think that, when you die, like there's this whole just kumbaya, get along, everybody, when they talk about the ancestors in this just generic collective, omniist perspective, like like the ancient Apaches, and the settlers that they were killing each other. Like once they die, they're just, oh, high five and hey man, no hard feelings. No, we're cool now because we're in the afterlife and it's all just gravy. Hell no. Hell no. We were beefing here and we're going to be beefing there. That's the nature of it. And if you can be honest about that, honest about the nature of conflict, then you can avoid it.
Yeah.
But you don't avoid conflict by seeking interactions with entities that are historically opposed to you. And you do that, why? Because they're widely presented, because you've got somebody who's got, oh yeah, look, I've got a master's degree in paranormal studies. That's great. Fascinating. You've got a piece of paper with your name on it. You know what that's called? That's called an appeal to authority. That's a logical debate fallacy.
Okay.
But people who are insecure are not going to question somebody who presents themselves as an authority. They're going to acquiesce to authority.
Yeah.
Because as long as that authority tells them what the truth is, then they don't have to lean on their own understanding. They don't have to apply any measurable level of discernment. They can just smile and nod and pay the price and get their certification. And like, oh, look, Master, Bob Himbelay, I took his 6-week course, and he gave me this document that I could print out on any kind of paper I wanted. I went down to Kinko's and I got the really nice graduation certificate paper with the little like foil embossing and everything, and printed it up, and look, I've got it framed and it's awesome, and it says that I did all my shadow work, because I went through this class. And the guy, he told me, and it was a step, yeah, and I even cried a couple of times. It was heartfelt, and this dude's laughing his ass off all the way to the bank. Why? Because he's got 80 of you signed up.
Right.
And it's like I said, and it's a game of Mad Libs. where he turns and he like has you fucking feed your stuff in, and then he just like regurgitates it back to you, and all it is spiritual masturbation.
You you're so harsh, Stephen. The reason why I say that is because with just the conversation that we've been talking about with the guides, um, I can already feel that it stepped on a lot of toes right there. And but this is about
Yeah,
different
absolutely.
perspectives. This is different perspectives, and that's why we do this. And I like it. But even I was kind of like, I don't know, because it even because when it comes to, I'm going to put it this way, when it comes to anything religious or spiritual, it's something we have to take in faith. We don't know. And so when it comes to guides and the afterlife, my thought, what I've believed is that all of the challenges and problems happen on the earth plane because that's the classroom where it happens, the emotions, etc. But once they go to the other side and they're in the spirit, all that drips away and they all get along. Now I realize, as you've said, but the Germanic heathen tradition is not the only one. There's others that also say that on the other side it kind of continues too. So that's an area where I'm like, I'm not sure, but I'm always open to new perspectives. Absolutely, because it's good to know. The ancestors, though, clearly that's what comes across to me is that they are our number one line of defense, and a lot of the guides that we have, they are our ancestors. And I always assumed this one's an ancestor, that one is, I don't know, a unicorn or something. I don't know. So it's very unclear to me. But I do know people that can say, I have 8 guides and they are, and I'm like, I don't know how many I have. I know that I get a collective message, but I don't know who all it comes from. I have no clue. So I have kind of felt lacking because I don't know my guides individually like some people do. And to each their own, that's really cool. But I do know that we do have support that can help us. And I think maybe reaching out to them more than trying to do all the shadow type stuff on our own might be a little more helpful. Because it's a trap. It can be a trap, as we've talked about already. But that's a deep, you see, and you always do this. You did this in our classes too, every rune, because every night was a different rune. And you'd say, what does this rune mean? I would kind of look it up and say, well, this is what it means to me. And you're like, that's lovely. But, and then
And
you would
like
give
you
all this
said though, right?
clarity.
Yeah.
What?
But Mike, like you said, we do have help
Right.
from the ethereal, from the unseen,
Yeah.
from the after, from the beyond, whatever label you want to put on it. I'm not my statement was not to take away from any source of help that we receive from
Right.
the
I like
beyond. I'm calling to task the people who, what, like you said, there you'll come across these people like, oh, I've got 8 spirit guides from this and that, and it's all about, like, again, these merit badges, like, oh, look at me, look at all these entities that have chosen me. Okay, cool. And what is, and how many prescription drugs do you take? How often do you go to a therapist?
Yeah.
What is the state of your romantic life? Oh, my whole life is a complete shambles. But like, no, like, stop. We're not talking about that. We're talking about my plethora of spirit guides. You
Yes.
know, like I said, the proof is in the pudding.
It is, and it
And
comes to
that's
the,
the whole.
go ahead.
And I'm sorry, but I just wanted to say, like I said, the guides that we do have, every one of us has guides. Every one of us has people that are actively invested in our success. But
Mhm.
we've got to be honest about who those entities are, so that way we can establish a healthy reciprocal relationship with them
Yes.
and not allow ourselves to be deceived about the nature of these entities. Because again, it goes back to, assigning motives and analyzing motives. Who has a vested interest in your success, and who has a vested interest in deceiving you.
Yes.
There are a lot of people out there who they don't care if they're selling you a lie, as long as they're selling you. And that's a big motivator in a lot of this. you know,
This
and
self-help
that's
industry.
what I'm so wary about.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
self-help
you know,
industry
they've
is making a fortune off of people that truly want to change and be better people. The people that also stand in front of the mirror and say, I don't want to be like that anymore, you know? And it's like sitting ducks. Their hearts are in the right places and they don't know
yeah,
hardship maybe, but they know heartship and they know what that feels like and they want that to be better, you know?
absolutely. And that, and like you're saying, that that earnest desire is exploited so much, and you know,
Yes.
people, there are people out just waiting to take advantage of that. And you know, and that's where it comes back to looking inside and saying, you know, I've got to be okay with me. I've got to be okay with not being okay sometimes. I've got to be okay with feeling overwhelmed. I've got to be okay with not having the answers, because that goes back to that confirmation bias when you need to know. And so, and you're just so desperate for an answer, any answer.
Mhm.
That right there is a trap, because any answer will do as long as it conforms loosely to your preconceptions, as long as it fits in that puzzle you've already started putting together in your head. Then you're going to go with it,
Yes.
you know, and you might turn around and throw away some valid pieces because of this one that you put in the wrong spot for you. You know, you said a thing earlier about, you know, these people talking about, you know, speak your truth. Speak your truth. That's the thing. There is no your truth. There's the truth, you know. There's your opinion, there's your perspective, but your perspective is not the truth. The truth is the truth. The truth is not subjective, it's objective. It is or it is not, you know. And that's the whole thing, is like, you know, when we start trying to transpose our values over what is or what is not, that's when we start deceiving ourselves, that's when we start lying to ourselves. And that's what, when we have to start questioning, what about this is triggering me? What about this am I needing to shield myself from?
Mhm.
Because that's what all of this comes back to. All this self-deception is we're trying to hide the truth from ourselves. And you have to ask, what truth am I ignoring in this? I am trying to ignore the truth and make this my truth. I'm trying to demand others conform to my imagination. And that's not even reality. That's just imagination. That's just a ponderance in your mind. And yes, manifestation thought starts in the mind, and you know, and it flows to the spoken word. You know, what we think, what we speak on is what we create. And that's important, because if what we're thinking on, if what we're speaking on, if what we're creating is a lie, then it doesn't matter the shape that that lie takes. The truth is that that is a lie.
Yes.
It doesn't matter why you shaped the lie. It is a lie. It doesn't matter how far back the lie has been going on. You continue to give it life. You continue to speak it into existence through false positivity, through fear, because you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings, because you don't want to say the wrong thing, because because your message might be misinterpreted. That's not on you. You can only call water wet, grass green, and the sky blue. That may offend the tender sensibilities of some individuals out there, but that doesn't change reality in one bit.
That's very much shifting so much in our society because of all of the self-labeling, identification, and the stuff that's taking place in on all aspects. It's becoming very fluid, and it's just based on a person's their proclamation for themselves, and that's to be accepted as truth. And it's a challenge to even have, like, debate doesn't really happen anymore. Anytime two people have a disagreement, it's an argument. Anything, there's conversation or communication is broken down, and it's hard to have a conversation based on any type of foundation because there's no actual always a truth put down, because it has to be based on some truth. But if you have two different people coming to with their own individual truth, there's not a lot of common ground there, and it's a challenge, and it's felt, and it's definitely, we see it playing out all around us. At the same time, there's this, I don't know, other thing going on of kind of trying to give it more of a spiritual overtone or something, I guess. I don't know how to describe that, but with the manifestation, you're absolutely right. We can say all the affirmations we want. I can have my entire room be a vision board. Everything is perfect and flawless. But if I don't believe that about myself, I'm not going to be able to receive it. It's not going to happen. And in fact, I will be manifesting, but not what's on the vision board, the things that I fear. And that's what I'm going to manifest. And it's a cycle that's easy to get stuck in. Well, I know we've covered a lot of ground tonight, and I'm going to ask you, so I have all my questions from the notes that I have, but I'm going to ask, is there anything that I didn't ask that you would like to talk about that's related to any of this or anything else?
Well, just as like a follow up to the last point you mentioned about manifestation and, your spoken word and your thought patterns, I tell people a lot when I'm trying to teach initiates about the nature of manifestation. Think back to when you were a child and you were learning how to swim. Your whole thought process was don't drown, don't drown, don't drown. And as long as you were thinking don't drown, don't drown, don't drown, you were right on the edge of drowning. It's until you let go of that fear-based thought and the associated actions and you focused on swimming that you began to swim and you are no longer struggling to not drown. And so that's the key, is like being honest about like, what is your focus? What is your fixation? You have to move away from things that are detrimental to you. In this instance, it's being on the edge of drowning, and moving towards what you desire, which is fluid swimming. And so we just have to master our focus, and we have to be honest with ourselves and look inward, because, like with the rune Ansus, it's the rune of insight, of internal understanding. It's looking within ourselves and taking honest stock of our behaviors and our choices and our motivations. What leads us to do what we do? It doesn't matter what anybody else is doing. What leads us to do what we do? And once you start identifying your motives, then you can start making healthy choices about your actions and your behaviors. You can see if your actions are really serving your needs. Because a lot of times, like I said at the beginning, a lot of our behaviors are trauma responses, and trauma responses are almost universally unhealthy and unsustainable long-term behaviors.
Yes.
And we have to take stock of our trauma responses and assess the issue underlying those and move forward from there. Not try to recreate a healthy version of that, just move forward from that. Stop being immersed in that toxicity.
Yes. Well, kind of to take this full circle, I will say that probably like so many people watching this, and I was greatly influenced by The Secret when that came out. Prior to that, I didn't realize that we have any say in how our lives, that we have any control over how our lives are shaped. I just assume we throw it out there and we're victims or survivors or victors of fate, and God takes care of that, if it be his will. The Secret came out, and I started learning more about things that may be blocking me, whatever. And that's what slowly led into the shadow work. And then that gotten to the point where it's like, where does it end? This has got to end. What is happening? What is happening? And tonight you've addressed that really beautifully. And I appreciate you going in depth. It's for anyone watching, the disclaimer that should have come up front. And we don't really need a disclaimer, really. We're all grown adults. We're in this for the long haul. We know what we're doing. And we need to have reality checks from time to time and things that push us to the limit, because when we expand, we also grow into that extra space and we become better people. But there are limitations to what we can do or what we should be doing. And Stephen's really talked about that tonight. I mentioned in the very beginning is that he was my rooms teacher. And I do want to point out that he also has a great book and that he has written. And Stephen posts, he has a blog, he posts a lot of different things. He travels around the country to different metaphysical fairs and different types of Viking fairs. He's everywhere. He's everywhere. And I'm happy I caught him tonight for this interview because he's very busy. But what I'll do is in the write-up for this, I'll have all his links available for you if you want to reach out to him or buy anything. He sells, he makes runes. He's got a lot going on, a lot to choose from. So if you ever get the opportunity to meet him in person, definitely do that because it will change your perspective on so many things. And if you ask him a question, he's not afraid to give you the answer. So you'll definitely benefit from that. But Stephen, I want to say thank you so much for this tonight. I really appreciate your time. And I always learn and grow from you. So I really value that. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mike, and I appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you again. Have a
You,
great evening.
you will
Bless you.
soon. All right. Well, thank you everybody for watching this. And thank you for following me on the metaphysical journey. I hope you all have a very beautiful evening.